Assalamu alaikum and good day to you. I'm Nabil, your host for today's lecture of Engineers in Society. I would like to recall what we have learned in the previous lesson. There are three stages in risk management. The first stage is the hazard identification, where you need to identify the hazard based on their 6 classes. The second stage is the risk assessment to prioritize the risk, and the third stage is the risk control actions to be carried out based on the assessment. I hope by this moment you have a clear understanding on the first stage. Today we are going to learn about risk assessment and risk control. Risk assessment is a careful examination of the hazards so that you can evaluate whether you have sufficiently implement safety precautions or improve the existing control measures. The law does not expect you to eliminate all risk, but you are required to protect the workers as far as reasonably practicable. Thus, in the assessment, do not overcomplicate the process. You need to keep it simple but informative. In many organizations, the risks are well known and the necessary control measures are easy to apply. Take reasonable precautions based on identified daily activities. If you run a small organization and you are confident that you understand what's involved, you can do the assessment yourself. You don't have to be a health and safety expert just to ensure the safety of your workplace. Now, how do we assess the risk? The methodology is generally divided into two approaches, qualitative approach or quantitative approach. The first approach, the qualitative, is a subjective approach which is guided by our perception or judgmental decisions with technical knowledge. It is an evaluation of likelihood that the frequency of a certain hazard would occur and its consequences would extend to a certain severity. Now, the second approach, the quantitative, is an objective approach which is supported by scientific studies and measurements of historical data. It evaluates the probability of occurrence and compares the results with limit values. This is an example of qualitative risk assessment matrix. The risk numbers are classified with certain weight factor that corresponds to a certain risk criteria. As I mentioned before, risk number is the sum of probability times severity. So in this matrix, the highest risk number is 20 as a result of frequent occurrence, which is number 5, times catastrophic outcome, number 4. And the lowest is 1, will not occur, times negligible outcome. A specific action plan is outlined for every risk number. This action plan is prepared based on the hierarchy of control measures that we shall learn in detail later. It is important that the definition for each term of the frequency of occurrence has a distinct explanation in order to avoid misinterpretation of the overall assessment. There is no exact number of categories for the hazard. You could decide the categories based on your understanding and awareness on technical issues related to the hazard. Now, we move to the quantitative approach. In this approach, we use frequency rate to determine the frequency of accidents or injury or severity of injury. The rate equals to event, denoted by A, times the numerical base, denoted by B, then divided by exposure, denoted by C. Bear in mind that the numerical base may differ according to the standards being referred. The American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, rated B as 1 million hours. whereas the Bureau of Labor Statistics use B as 200,000 hours per year. Let us look at the example of frequency rate calculation. A plant had 18 accidents per year, during which employee worked a total of 1.2 million hours. And during the same period, there were 6 disabling injuries. Using the ANSI standard, the frequency rate for accident and injury would be 15 per million man-hours and 5 per million man-hours respectively. Since the basis of BLS standard is 1/5 of the ANSI standard, the frequency rate using BLS standard would be 1/5 of the ANSI standard. So, when the frequency rates are cited, you need to know the base. In some industry, the accident rate may be high, but its severity of injury may be minor. Other industries may have the opposite. ANSI standards use time charges in calculating the disabling injury severity rate. There are two ways in calculating the average days charge, as shown in the slide. Please note that the second way are calculated based on the previous calculation. For financial loss, it can be calculated using the BLS method as shown in the slide. In order to perform the assessment, this is a simple guideline to select the jobs at your workplace. You can use either accident frequency, accident severity, judgment and experience, jobs with high turnover, new jobs, non-routine or routine jobs. After performing the risk assessment, we shall perform the final stage of risk management, that is risk control actions as outlined in the risk assessment matrix. There are two main steps in risk control. The first one is to control the risk either by eliminating, minimizing, or controlling the hazard. The second step is to check and review whether the risk control applied earlier is effective or not. Risk elimination is the best solution because hazard is controlled at their source, but normally it is not practicable in most industries. Second phase is risk minimization. This is achieved either by substitution of the hazardous substance or work practice with less hazardous one, or isolation of hazard from the workers. The next phase is risk control using the personal protective equipment or PPE. Another phase is reviewing the existing control measures and apply engineering or administrative controls. In order for us to achieve the objectives of managing the OSH at workplace, we therefore need to look at a systematic approach. There is no one way to do a risk assessment, as there are many methods that work well, particularly for more complex risk and circumstances. This is an example of risk management steps using the HSE approach. However, HIRAC is the systematic approach applied in Malaysia for an effective OSH management system. HIRAC is the acronym of what we have learned so far in this course. It is a compound word made up of three consecutive activities that forms the basis of risk management. Why we need to manage risks? It is mandatory for the industry to perform HIRAC in compliance with FMA 1967 and OSHA 1994 and the respective regulations. The employer must provide a safe workplace to their employees and other related persons as stated in OSHA Act 1994. These are the acts. We also need to comply with the management standards. HIRAC would enable the organization to manage hazards effectively and evaluate the efficiency of current controls. To recap our lesson, hazard identification is the recognizing of things which may cause injury or harm to a person. Risk assessment is the looking at the possibility of injury or harm occurring to a person if exposed to a hazard. And risk control is the introduction of measures which will eliminate or reduce the risk of a person being exposed to a hazard. Now this is the end of the lecture. I hope by now you have a clear understanding on how to perform risk management using the HIRAC process. HIRAC forms the backbone of an occupational safety and health management system where you can apply other safety tools throughout the process to ensure effective risk control and safe working environment. Thank you and have a nice day.